glad it's Friday. I'm glad it is the afternoon of a Friday. So, good afternoon, everybody. We are missing one person today. I've got nothing to return to today since last class we had talked about how you needed workbook page 105 to do the flip side selected exercises on page 106. I will be collecting one of the two pages today. However, what I want to do first, as I usually do, is see if there are any questions on either page 106 or that handout that I gave you as well. All right, I see Matthew's got a question.
Number 3 on the page 106.
Number 3? Okay. Let's start there. All right, so number 3 on workbook page 106 is in the key of D. And we have 5-7. We're supposed to part write it to a 1 chord. And in the instructions, it tells us what does the little C underneath this mean? Complete, and then the I underneath, the little italicized letter I underneath the 1 means what? Incomplete, right? Okay. So we have to start out with a complete 5-7 chord, and I believe that was given to us. So we have an A in the bass, we have an E in the tenor, we have the 7th of the chord, G in the alto, and we have C sharp, which is already sharp from the key signature in the soprano voice. Now the workbook is telling us that we are going to end up with an incomplete tonic chord here. And the reason we will need to end up with an incomplete tonic chord is because we need to resolve or kind of move our 2 tendency tones in the 5-7 chord. We need to take them where they're supposed to go, where they have to go. We have to resolve them first. And then the rest of the notes in the chord should lead us to an incomplete tonic. Does anyone remember from last class, what are the 4 pitches of an incomplete tonic chord? How many roots, how many thirds, and how many fifths?
3 roots, 1/3, and 1/5.
That's right. 3 roots, 1/3, and no fifth. So that's what we want to end up with over here. Okay. So the question becomes at this point, what are my 2 most important, what are my tendency tones in this A, C sharp, E, G chord? Well, one tendency tone is always the 3rd of the 5-7. It's this one right here. Because the 3rd of this chord is always scale degree 7, or T of the key. And we had learned last semester, and we iterated last class, that when we have scale degree 7 in an outer voice, namely the soprano voice, where does it have to go as it goes to the next chord? It has to go up, and it goes up by a half step to do. So this C sharp has no other option. It has to go up to D. It has to go up to D. Okay. The other tendency tone, which pitch? Can anyone tell me?
7.
Yeah, which is it? The A, the E, or the G? The G, yeah. The G is the chord's 7th. This is the root, that's the 3rd, this is the 5th, and that's the 7th. And the 7th of the chord, not the 7th degree of the scale, but the 7th of the chord always needs to go down by step. So the G is going to go down to an F sharp, which fits into the chord I'm trying to spell. When you take care of the 2 tendency tones first, then 50% of the work is left, that's all. What do I need to have in the bass in order to have a root position 1, which this is calling for? A D, right? Now, you might be tempted, you say I've got a D, I've got a D and I've got an F sharp, I need an A. You might be tempted to say, oh, I'm going to have the tenor go all the way down to an A. But if you did that, you would be sorely mistaken, because you would end up writing parallel fifths, and you cannot do that. That is why the one chord that we're writing over here is supposed to be incomplete. So that we don't write those parallel perfect fifths, we need to take the tenor just down the step, have 3 roots. There's 1 D, 2 Ds, and 3 Ds. I like movies in 3D, by the way. Sorry, I didn't even get this back. I like 3D movies, but anyway. Yeah, 3 Ds and 1 F sharp. 3 roots and 1/3. You guys ever go to a 3D movie with those glasses? They don't do those much anymore. You've never done that?
I have, but I don't like it.
Oh, you don't care for it?
It hurts my head.
Oh. So hopefully, Maddie, that gets to your question, how you do that one. What time do we got here? Okay, how about another question if anyone has one? Yes?
Number 4 on page 106.
Number 4 on page 106. Okay. Now let me erase this. Looks like we are in A flat major for this problem. And they tell us that we're starting out with an incomplete 5/7 chord. Whenever we begin with, or we have an incomplete 5/7 chord, we're guaranteed to be able to end up with a complete 5 chord. And I know you can look at the notes right there that are given in number 4, but what notes do we use to make it to spell an incomplete 5/7?
Oh, and incomplete 5/7?
Yeah.
Isn't it the same as the incomplete one or not?
Not exactly. The incomplete tonic has 3 roots and 1/3 and no fifth.
It's just the first, or the root, third, and 7th, and no fifth, right?
That's right, but you have to have the root doubled in an incomplete 5/7. So you want 2 roots, 1/3, no fifth, and 1/7. And that's what you should have given to you here in number 4. Sure enough, here's a root E flat. There's another root E flat right there. The 3rd of the chord is in the top voice, and the 7th of the chord happens to be right there in B tenor. That's an incomplete 5/7. Notice there's no B flat in the chord. In an E flat, G, B flat, D flat chord, there's no B flat. That makes it an incomplete 5/7. Okay, so once again, let's find out where my important 2 tendency tones are, and let's take care of them. Can anyone tell me the pitch of one of those tendency tones I'm trying to find?
The G.
The G, okay, good. The G is actually scale degree 7. So which direction does it have to go? Good. Yeah, in another voice it has to go up to A flat, to do. Good. The other tendency tone is which pitch? The E flats or the D flat? I hope you would say the D flat. That's the 7th of the chord. And by that I mean root, 3rd, 5th, which we don't have, and the 7th. The 7th of the chord. What voice is the 7th of the chord in? Just so it happens to be in the tenor voice. But wherever it is, it has to come down by step, so that's going to have to come down to the C. For root position 1 chord in A flat, I need the root A flat. You can take it up to this A flat, you can take it down to the lower A flat, it doesn't matter in the bass. And then the only other pitch I need to complete this complete tonic chord is an E flat, and it's right there in the alto, I don't have to move it. But again, I can't overstress how important it is. You gotta be able to find your 2 tendency tones in the 5/7 chord first, and deal with them. I would get in the habit of dealing with those, treating them first. And then the other 2 pitches that are left over shouldn't be too problematic. Okay, so the one page I'd like to collect today is actually workbook page 106. So could you make sure your name is on that page somewhere? And I'll come around and pick that up, and then we'll take a look at the answers to the handout. Oh. Okay. Good. You talk to me. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the handout that you had, which was still on 574. Top section, you had to spell. I asked you to spell 3, 5, 7 chords. This is, oh, I'm going to turn the TVs on. This is similar to the assignment prior to this on workbook page 105, where I gave you a chord member of the 5, 7 chord, and you had to spell the 5, 7 in root position, I believe. There we go. So, first problem. You're given A is the 5th of a dominant 7th chord. Notating the chord in root position, you should have a D on the bottom, F sharp, the A that was given, and C. That makes it a major minor 7th chord, dominant 7th. The next one. D sharp is the 3rd of a root position 5, 7 chord. That means you need B below, the D sharp, the F sharp above, and the A above. B, D sharp, F sharp, A. Always makes a dominant 7th type chord. And there's no key signatures here, by the way, either, so we have to use accidentals as needed to make the 7th chord the type that's required here, the major minor 7th. Finally, the third one on the right, on this section, should be not a lot of space there, but you should have, if G is the 7th, you need A as the root, C sharp as the 3rd, E as the 5th, and then G as the top. I guess I had to squeeze my A, C sharp, E down here. Does anyone have any questions about how to spell it? Again, you can't really part write a 5, 7 chord correctly if you don't really know how to spell them, if you don't know which notes are what in the dominant 7th. Okay. The next section is always interesting. You know, I used this handout that we're going over right now, years and years ago, I used to give it as an in-class quiz. And I'm just curious as to how you did in section number 2. Did you find one chord that was not a dominant 7th chord, that is letter E? Which one of those 5 is not a dominant 7th?
Number 3.
Yeah, and why is it not a dominant 7th chord?
Because C to B is major, not minor.
There you go, yeah, because the C to B is a major 7th, not a minor 7th. Number 3, in order for it to be a dominant 7th, would need to have a B flat in the top voice. So, the answers for this section should be number 1 is B, number 2 is D, 3 is E, this last also, here we go. 4 is C, and 5, therefore must be A. Yes?
Can you briefly explain how you got C and A for 4 and 5?
Yes. And C, as the choice, is a second inversion dominant 7th chord. So if we look at number 4, and we put all these notes, stack them in thirds, we've got 4 different ones. I've got a B flat, a D, an F, and an A flat. When if I notate that chord in root position, B flat, D, F, A flat, that is, first of all, a major minor seventh chord. It is. Which of these four pitches is the lowest sounding one in number 4? The fifth of the chord. And whenever the fifth of a chord, triad or seventh chord, is on the bottom, we say it's in second inversion. And the second inversion symbol for second inversion seventh chord is 4-3. So that's why that one is the dominant seventh in second inversion.
I think my problem is that I have a really hard time sometimes being able to put the notes in order, because sometimes I see the visual and I try to mesh it together and it doesn't work for me. And so I think that I like understand it, but just as clarification, it's because sometimes I don't see how the notes stack together.
Yeah, it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of time, a lot of going over it and over it and seeing these chords again and again and again. I mean, I'm used to this kind of thing, but if you can get it to be in stacked thirds, the only way to stack all 4 notes of these in thirds is to have the B flat on the bottom, the D and the F in the middle, and then the A flat on the top. And when you can see the chord like that, then you're looking at it, and you're looking at it, what you see is what you get. I mean, you're getting face value. You know that's the root there. You know that's the third, that's the fifth, and that's the seventh. Yep. So then number 5 has to be a root position dominant seventh chord. This one is just a little tricky, but it's not too bad. We actually only have 3 pitches, I think, here, right? We have an A flat, which is doubled. We have a C, and we have a G flat. So what's the tone that's missing out of this dominant seventh chord? The E flat, right? So we don't have that. But is it okay to have a 5-7 or dominant 7 without a fifth? Yes, it is. So really, this is an incomplete 5-7. But because when I stack it in thirds, I know the root is A flat, and you see how A flat is the lowest tone? So that means it's got to be in root position. And we show a root position 7th chord with a 7. So that's why that one is A, root position. And we talked about why number 3 is E. It's not even a dominant 7th chord. All right, and then, I don't know, it turns out the part writing example on the bottom of this is a repeat of one. Isn't it the same as number 5 in the workbook?
I didn't notice if it was.
You didn't notice if it was? I think this is the same as number 5 that I just collected that page. But it doesn't hurt to look at it again. I've tried in the 5-7 chord, I've tried to circle the 2 tendency tones. The chord, this is an F, A, C, E flat chord. The E flat in the tenor is the 7th of the chord, so that has to come down by step to D. The A that's in the alto, that's scale degree 7 of my T. And what happens, what can you do with T when it's in an inner voice? Does it have to go up by half step? No, you can frustrate T down. And I did that very thing, so that I can end up with, in fact, the instructions call for a complete tonic chord. The tonic triad should be complete, yeah.
If you did it on any other way, would that be incorrect? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the only other thing you could do differently is the bass note F could go up to a B flat. But the tenor has to be on a D, and in order to get a complete tonic, the alto would have to be on the F, and the soprano would have to be on the B flat, yeah. Okay. Any other questions about that one? You see why it's really critical and important to find your be able to find the 2 tendency tones in the 5-7. Which one is scale degree 7? That is T. Which pitch is the 7th of the chord? Because the 7th of the chord goes down. T generally goes up, unless it's in an inner voice. That's the proper way to incorporate a 5-7 chord. move on then.
Dr. Hawkinson.
Oh, yes.
I thought that there was more. I have this done,
Oh, okay.
so that's my bad.
The end of last class, I had gone through kind of a little table or chart that looks like this. And I had explained how, of all the different inversions of a 5/7 chord, part writing root position 5/7, which is what we're doing now, that is the most difficult. The root position 5/7 is the most difficult to cover. We talked about how there are 4 possibilities to deal with incomplete 5/7s and complete 5/7s versus incomplete and complete tonic chords. One possibility, which we never ever need to go down that road and use, would be part writing an incomplete 5/7 to an incomplete tonic. We never are forced to do that, so we're just going to ignore that possibility completely, never use it. When you start with an incomplete 5/7, as I did here, you are guaranteed to have a complete tonic chord. And it goes to 1. You should have a complete tonic chord. And I mean by that, I mean 2 roots, a third, and a fifth. Everything doubled, all the notes there, as you would expect. When we have a complete 5/7 chord, sometimes we are forced to write or spell an incomplete tonic. Which should tell me what has to be true about the 5/7 chord when it's complete that forces an incomplete tonic chord.
T's an outer voice.
That's right. This is always going to be true if T is in an outer voice. Because when T is in an outer voice, it's forced to go only one direction. Has to go up. There are other times, however, when a complete 5/7 chord can lead to a complete tonic chord. And the only way that is possible is when T is where? Yeah,
Inner voice.
in an inner voice, that's right. T is in inner voice. Because when it's in an inner voice, it can be frustrated down. Today, I would like to talk to you about how to part write 5/7 to 6. A deceptive progression that starts with a 5/7 rather than just a 5 triad. And then after that, I want to teach you how to part write the remaining inversions of the 5/7. The first inversion, second inversion, and third inversion. And I've said many times before, that's actually a lot easier to do than part writing a root position 5/7. Okay. So, space here. And I'm going to use G minor as my key of illustration. And I'm going to start with a good old 5/7 in the key of G minor. I'm going to voice it this way. D, F sharp, A, C. Oh, by the way, yeah, we could use tons of practice on this. In a minor key, which of these 4 notes requires me to raise it with an accidental?
T.
Yeah, and which one is it?
F.
The F, yeah. So not F natural, but F sharp. If I don't do that when I'm in a minor key, if I don't raise T with an accidental scale degree 7, it's a lousy minor 5/7 and it won't sound dominant at all. Now, we talked about at length how to part write 5/7 to root position 1 last class. But we have not talked about how to resolve a 5/7 deceptively. We expect 5/7 to go to root position 1, That's its normal motion, its normal destination. But once in a while, 5-7, just like the triad itself, can go to 6. When a 5-7 resolves deceptively to 6, the third of the 6 chord is still doubled. Just like when a 5 triad goes to 6, remember we used that exceptional doubling rule, and we double the third of the 6 chord, not the root? Well, that exceptional doubling rule is still true when 5-7 goes to 6. So, where are my two tendency tones, by the way, in this 5-7? What's one of them? The D, the C, the F sharp, or the A? Okay, the F sharp. That is scale degree 7. T of the key. Normally, since I see the T is in an inner voice, normally you might think, well, I have the prerogative or the choice to frustrate it down. But when 5-7 goes to 6 in a deceptive progression, you never want to frustrate T down, even when it's in an inner voice. You always take T up.
Can you say that again? Like, why you can't frustrate it down?
Well, you're not going to want to frustrate it down because you want to have, this is the exceptional, you want to double the third of this chord. This is going to end up being an E flat, G, B flat chord. And when you take T up, that's going to give you one of those thirds. So in a deceptive progression, even when T is in an inner voice, we're always going to take it up to do by move it up by half step. The bass, in order to form a root position 6 chord in this key, the bass has to go up to E flat. Where's the, I shouldn't do these out of order, my bad. Where's the other tendency tone in this 5-7 chord? The tenor, yeah. You see how C is the 7th of the chord? And where does the 7th of the chord always have, how does it have to move? Down by step, that's right. So knowing that I need to double the third finally of my 6th chord, where's the soprano going to go? Is it going to go up to B flat or is it going to go down to G?
B flat.
You want to say B flat?
I do.
If I took the soprano up to B flat, I would have parallel fifths between the bass and the soprano. The third of this chord, is it not G? That's the one we want 2 of. So I've got one in the alto. Oops, that was terrible. Let's have another one in the soprano. That's correct part rating for that. I've got the G double, the sopranos and the altos have it. Just like when we part rate a 5 triad to a 6 chord in the deceptive progression, notice how when we do the 5-7 to 6, aren't 2 voices going up and 2 voices still coming down? It's basically almost identical. It's just almost identical. If you still take 2 voices up and 2 voices down, chances are you're going to end up with the right part rate. Here we need your E minor. Okay, here's the 5-7. And instead of going to this, which would be 1, we're taking it this way. To a 6 chord. Next thing I'm going to tell you is just for your information only. You don't really need to know this, but I'm going to tell you anyways. And that is, you'll find this in your reading of the pages in the book that I assigned. And that is, if you have an incomplete 5-7, and you try to resolve it deceptively to 6, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So the moral of the story, and I'll show you that in a second, but the moral of the story is whenever 5, 7 goes to 6, can you make sure you've got a complete 5, 7? Everything you need in the 5, 7 should be there to start with. If I try to resolve this incomplete 5, 7 to 6, where should that be the alto go? To fill out my E flat to B flat chord. Should the D in the alto go up to E flat? No, why not? Because if the D and the alto went up to E flat, I have parallel octaves between the bass and the alto. They're both doing that. So that's not a good idea. Doubling the fifth of the triad by bringing this down to B flat, that sounds bad. And then having it leap all the way up to a G, that's not good either. So we're never gonna use an incomplete 5, 7 and take it to a 6, a deceptive resolution. Whenever 5 or 5, 7 goes to 6, we're always going to use a complete chord. Works the best that way. Have I lost anyone yet? Is anyone daydreaming about what they're going to do on the weekend already? No, not in this. Of course not. All right, so it remains for us then to go through an example each of how to part write the various inversions of the 5, 7 chord. We've treated root position 5, 7s a great deal now. I hope that process is going to stick with you, certainly through the test time. By the way, when is our first test? It's a week from today. What's that?
It should be.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it's the 12th.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Quickly, what are the base position numbers or inversion numbers that we use to indicate the various base positions of a 7th chord? Root position, what's the only number we need? 7. How about for the first inversion of the 7th chord? What numbers do we use? 6, 5. Good. Second inversion? 4, 3. And finally, third inversion? 4, 2. So we just took 1 minute. I mean, I could explain what these mean again, but this was really just a quick 1-minute review of what we probably took the whole class period to do last semester. Okay, we've been focusing on how to part write the root position 5, 7. We've done that a lot. Let me, let's see, what key do I want to use here for this? Let me, for my example, let's go to the key of D minor, which has 1 flat in the key signature. Let's start with part writing a 5, 6, 5 chord. That is a first inversion, dominant 7. Let's make sure I copy this right. First of all, before we move the notes to the 1 chord, I want someone to tell me, look at that 5, 6, 5 chord, and I want you to tell me, or tell me, I need you to add the 1 accidental that's necessary to make it a dominant 7. Because we're in a minor key. Where's the accidental that I need to add go?
Accidental C.
That's right. C, make it C what?
C sharp.
That's right. Exactly right. Good. Now I'm working with everything I need. That chord is spelled properly now. Okay. When part writing inversions of 5, 7, we are always going to use complete 5, 7 chords, And we are always going to end up with complete tonics. Never any incompletes when we're dealing with 5/7 inversion. The incomplete possibilities are only when you part right root position 5/7, okay? I know that's hard to remember because there's a lot of information floating around here, but everything's going to be complete when we deal with inverted 5/7 chord. The only other principle you need to remember to part right inverted 5/7 chords correctly is find the two tendency tones as you have been before. And this time you follow their tendencies every time with no exception. So even when T is in an inner voice, when you're dealing with an inverted 5/7 chord, you never need to frustrate T. T is always going to go up by half step, the seventh is always going to come down by step. Kind of makes it a little bit easier because there's no exceptions. It's just kind of blanket. If you remember to do this, you'll get it. All right, so we need more practice identifying the two tendency tones. What is one tendency tone in this 5/6/5? Good, C sharp. And that is T of the key. Is T of the key in an outer voice? For the first time, yes, T is actually in another outer voice besides the soprano. The bass is considered an outer voice too. So it definitely needs to go up by half step. But we're never going to frustrate T anyways with these inverted chords. So just automatically just take it up by half step to do. That D is do of the key. Okay, that's one tendency tone. Which of these three remaining pitches is the other tendency tone?
The G.
Good, the G. That's the seventh of the chord. A, C sharp, E, G. And how does the seventh of the chord have to move?
Down.
Yes. Thank you. Down by step, right? It's not going to go down by like leaps and bounds. It just goes down just by step every time. Look at that. I got the note I need to fill out part of my D minor chord I'm spelling. Okay? It looks like I'm spelling a DFA chord. The A, I already have one in the soprano. Let's just leave it there. And what do I need to double in my root position DFA chord? The bass, yeah, another D. Well, I can get one really easily from the alto. Proof. And there should be no parallel fifths or octaves or any other part rating errors or problems. So, in the key of G minor, we have, let me look at my music here, we have this as a 5/6/5 going to 1. Those are the two tendency tones. They resolve in the opposite direction. Try same key, different inversion of the 5/7 chord. Let's voice it this way. Again, what's the one accidental I need to add to make that a dominant seventh?
C sharp.
C sharp again. Yeah, still in the same key. Okay. Again, because it works in the same key, hopefully we can find these two tendency tones a little quicker. C sharp is obviously one of the tendency tones. That's T of the key, therefore it must go up. And the other tendency tone, as we said over here, is the G. That's the chord's seventh, and that has to come down by step. If I go to root position 1, the bass will have to go down to D, and the A and the tenor can stay where it is. Let me pose this situation to you. Can I take a 5-4-3 chord to a 1-6?
I don't think so.
The answer is yes, you can. I just want you to be aware that when 5-4-3 goes to 1-6, what I end up having to do, because I have to resolve the 7th of the chord down by step, this is a hard and a very serious, major, important rule and error. So what I have to do is I have to break my doubling rule for the 1-6. I don't know if any of you remember last semester, but in 1-6 chords I would always tell you do not double the bass. But yet again, here I have the F in the bass, I have another F. So the rule, the exception, I guess, to the rule is when 5-4-3 goes to 1-6, and only you have this chord in this inversion, go to this chord in this inversion, you are allowed to double the bass in the 1-6. You fudge on the doubling rule because the chord's 7th in this prior chord here has to come down by step. Does anyone have any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Let's go back over this one then. There's one more bass position of the 5-7 I need to part right, and that's the third inversion, the 5-4-2. So we want to voice this one. What am I missing accidentally again? Good. Before I'm going to take it to a 1 chord, but yeah, let's just resolve the 2 tendency tones first, and we'll see what type of 1 chord we get. We know that the C sharp is, of course, T of the key, and that never gets frustrated with inverted 5-7s, even when it's in an inner voice. The other tendency tone is the G, and how does the G have to go as the chord's 7th? Down by step. So just looking at the bass note in this DFA chord, the bass note is F. What bass position of 1 am I forced to take this 5-4-2 to? Take it?
Is it a 1-6?
That's right. Because I have the third of my DFA chord in the bottom. And the other pitches. Now here I don't want to double the bass if I can help it. So I'm going to take the soprano down to the D rather than up to the A. Now, I don't have a long enough board to have all of these various inversions just listed one by one all the way out. But something really big, really important I want you to take away from the class today is this. The tonic chord, when we take an inversion of a 5-7 to the tonic chord is either going to be in root position or first inversion only. The tonic chord, when we resolve a 5-7 in any inversion, will never be in second inversion. Never. You can only resolve or part right a 5 chord, 7 chord to a 1 or a 1-6. Another really big important point is that the bass position of the tonic chord is entirely at the mercy of where the inverted 5-7 chord's tendency tones fall.
Did you say that
Yeah.
again?
The inversion or the bass position of the tonic chord is entirely dependent upon or entirely at the mercy of where the 5/7 chord's tendency tones are. Because the placement of the 5/7 chord's tendency tones will determine whether this one is going to be root position or first inversion. That's a big deal. And the sooner students get that and understand that, because they know that they have to resolve the tendency tones, the easier it's going to be to know what goes to what specifically. What inversion goes to what inversion, that kind of thing. Because it's all dependent upon and at the mercy of where the tendency tones are. When they're down here, I have to end up with a 1/6. That is when the 7th of the chord is on the bottom. When they're up here, I can go to 1/6, or we saw before, I can go to root position 1. But it just depends on where the tendency tones are. Because they have to be moved and resolved one direction and one direction only. T goes up, the 7th of the chord goes down a step. Okay, so, what I can do is I want to summarize some of this information for you in another table. And this second table is almost more important than this table I've given you. We can conclude by doing all the various inversions of base positions with part rating 5/7. We can conclude the following. That root position 5/7 goes to root position 1, or, that's not up there anymore. What did I do about 20 minutes ago? Where can 5/7 also go?
1/6?
How about the deceptive progression, right? Yeah. Root position 5/7 goes to only root position 1 or a completely different chord, root position 6. It doesn't go to 1/6, it doesn't go to 1/6/4, it doesn't go to 6/6, it doesn't go to 6/6/4. Just these two root position chords only.
Could it be either major or minor?
Yes. So for instance, if I was writing this table in minor keys, it would be the exact same, but it would be this. Yep. That's a good point. Okay. Now I can't even remember. I don't have it on the board anymore, but 5/6/5 has to go to which base position of 1? Remember with a 5/6/5, T is in the base and has to go up by half step.
So it has to be a 1/6.
No, it's actually going to be root position 1. 5/6/5 has to go to root position 1. Because T in the base is going to go up a half step to Do, and you're going to have Do in the base underneath this 1 chord. That's going to make it root position. What about this inversion of 5/7, 5/4/3? I have one of them still there.
It's not full of 6.
The 5/4/3 can go either to root position 1 or the first inversion 1. Because the tendency tones are more up above, not down in the bottom area. And finally, the 5/4/2 only has one option, and it's over there. Which base position of 1 does it have to go to? 1/6. It has to go to 1/6. Because the 7th of the chord is on the bottom. And that will come down by step, which will give me the 3rd of this chord in the base, which will make it 1/6. So, this is a very important table. When you talk to any of my theory students that have been through Theory 2 and passed on to Theory 3, Theory 4, or even finished their theory, I hope they would say, oh, I remember that table. I remember that table. But now we know 5/7 root position has to go to one of these two chords. 5/6/5 always goes to this. If you're not taking it to root position 1, you're doing it wrong. 5/4/3 has a couple chord choices to go to, and 5/4/2 only has one chord. Yeah, I would have put this in your notes, by the way, too, because the book doesn't have this. All right, so the assignment for Monday is workbook pages 113 and 115. Just make sure you do the selected exercises only. but it's all in the workbook. And that's gonna be the last assignment for next week. Then we're gonna review for the test on Wednesday and take the test on Friday. All right, have a good weekend, guys. Thank you.
Which,